The people of Iraq have one truly vast and valuable national resource left to them: oil. With Saddam Hussein gone, his grip on the nation's resources has been broken. Thanks to the sacrifices of American troops and the Iraqi people, those resources, the oil, is now being returned to its historic rightful owners, the international oil companies. In our third story tonight, the New York Times reporting today that on this 30th of this month, 5 major oil companies, and a number of smaller ones too, will announce the first deals to service Iraq's largest oil fields. The companies include the 4 original partners in the Iraq Petroleum Company, which have wanted to get back in for 36 years. Mission freaking accomplished. The 4 returning companies are Exxon, Mobil, Shell, British Petroleum, and the French outfit Total. Exxon's former CEO, Lee Raymond, telling Newsweek last year, quote, "We basically had the whole country." He sounded wistful. More recently, the 4 companies have been advising Iraq about oil for free, a factor that helped them win these new no-bid contracts that are relatively small, but might just amount to footholds in the still-emerging Iraqi oil fields, said to be on par with Iran's the second largest in the world. Chevron, not one of the original 4 families, gets a taste too, along with the Barzini brothers. Iraq still does not have a law codifying its plan for how its share of oil revenues will be shared among its people. Perhaps the answer to that will be not at all. Mr. Bush used to point to the oil law as one of the key determinants of a surge success. The success Senator McCain says has already arrived. With us now, MSNBC political analyst Rachel Maddow, host, of course, of her own show on Air America Radio. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Keith.
Well, is this the smoking oil well that we've been waiting for since 2002?
Well, I'm a big believer in Occam's razor, right? That the simplest explanation is probably best. And if there is an explanation that's being proffered that doesn't make sense, discard it and look to the simple explanation instead. Right. And we've had a lot of explanations for why we went to Iraq, but none of them have ever really made sense. I mean, ties to al-Qaeda, there was never really any evidence of that. That was disproved. Weapons of mass destruction, no. Saddam, a bad man, definitely. Obviously not why we went. Corruption in the oil for food program, things that Saddam did before the first Gulf War. All of these things have been proffered as explanations. None of them have really made sense. And no matter what new retroactively applicable explanations for why we invaded the White House and war supporters have come up with, there's still been no credible explanation for why we went. Especially one that would explain not only why we went, but why it's so important that we don't leave now.
Exactly.
Why we must stay. I mean, if you believe that we went because Saddam was a bad man, what does having American troops there for 100 years now do with that?
Well, remember those stories that he thought he was immortal. Maybe they think he's going to jump out of the ground and take back the oil fields.
We're patrolling the tomb, just in case. Yeah. I mean, what actually does make sense, the actual simple explanation that has been staring us in the face since before the beginning, since a guy had to quit Halliburton in order to become vice president, is that they want Iraq to be an oil colony. I mean, it's a very 19th century idea, but it's their natural resources, it's our markets, it's our profits. It's an old idea, but it's always been what's been staring us in the face.
We have seen this point go from being the ridiculous, tin hat, paranoid explanation of the far left to the Bush administration rationale. Well, imagine if al-Qaeda got a hold of all the oil, what would it? It'd be $4 a gallon, wouldn't it? In the words of the vice president. Yeah. Does it at some point? Do they just pull all the walls down? Does this become John McCain's rationale for the war? Is he going to run on, we have to get the oil companies back in there because that's when we can bring the price of gas down? Because
we need a colony. Yeah. We need to go back.
We need the oil.
Well, it was the first week of May, just last month, and you and I talked about this. John McCain at a town hall event in Colorado today. I went back to the transcript and pulled this out. My friends, I will have an energy policy that we will be talking about, which will eliminate our dependence on oil from the Middle East, that will then prevent us from having ever to send our young men and women into conflict again in the Middle East. And remember, he dialed that back and he first said, oh, I was talking about the first Gulf War. That was the war for oil, not the second one. And then he dialed that back again and said, no, I didn't mean either of those. It was obviously about weapons of mass destruction. But maybe that was a Freudian slip, or maybe they are getting around to the idea that they'll say this was a war for oil and we need another.
So what happens in the event of an Obama victory in November to Iraq's oil? What sort of position does he have to take on it?
Well, I think if you don't want to be seen as a colonial power, you stop acting like one.
Yeah, that'd help.
And so You get the Americans out of the oil ministry, which is, still American advisors in the Iraqi oil ministry now. And honestly, you get the foreign occupying army off the streets of Iraq so that that country and its people have a choice and a chance at some point in the future of having a government that is seen as legitimate, as opposed to the occupied government, which we ensure that they're seen as long as our military is there.
Rachel Maddow of Air America and MSNBC, when we're fortunate. Thanks as always for coming in, Rachel.
Thank you, Keith.